Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox, and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email me, tmosso@thewatchbox.com. It's in the description below. Your purchase and pricing email question line for buying this or any watch you see on any Watchbox platform. Please reach out to me directly for pricing. Email me at tmosso@thewatchbox.com. Today we are discussing a lovely timepiece, part of a family launched in 1977. This is the reference 17013 Datejust Oysterquartz, or Oysterquartz Datejust. Timepiece 36 millimeters in diameter in stainless steel with yellow gold garnishing. It is of the integrated bracelet tonneau case sports watch class that emerged from the 1970s. Now, we can argue whether this is a dress watch or a sports watch, but the fact is it has elements of both, and its design is redolent of period flavor. In fact, Gerald Genta penned the Rolex 5100, Rolex's first watch in this style, as its Beta 21 entrant back in 1970, and he considered the Oysterquartz to be the continuation of his 5100 design. Even though the reference has changed, the basic layout here is very much of his doing. Now, taking a look at the watch, you can see 36 millimeters in diameter, but it does not wear like a conventional 36. The timepiece is a little bit bigger and it has a bit more presence. It's thin. It's as thin as a Daytona and only 12.2 millimeters thick on the wrist, and as you can see, it is 47.3 millimeters from lug tip to lug tip, so it's very narrow across the wrist. In spite of wearing with a large physical presence, the bracelet pulls straight down around a small wrist. Now the timepiece, we're going to pop open the clasp, put it on my wrist, which is 16 centimeters in circumference, and you can see it wears nicely. When I talked about the presence before, I really mean that the integration of the bracelet and the flow of bracelet into lug, into case, into bracelet is really one that creates the impression of a larger watch. So yes, it's a 36, but it appears larger on the wrist than, say, a conventional round-cased oyster-cased Datejust. This watch definitely looks a little bit more like a 38 or a 39, and it's low, it's flat, it's easy to fit underneath the cuff, so though it does have some sporty aspects to it, you can absolutely fit it with formal attire and tight sleeves. Now, taking a look at the bracelet, one of the fascinating things about the Oysterquartz bracelet is because it is integrated, you can actually read on the bottom the reference of the watch, and so you can see that underneath, and the serial numbers as well as the reference are on the lugs underneath the case, because normally you would have the serial number at 6 o'clock on a Rolex watch of this vintage, and then you would have the reference up at 12 o'clock underneath the lugs, and of course this does not make that possible, but you can see they're evident without having to remove any hardware. Taking a look at the bracelet, you can see it's in good shape. This watch has clearly been refinished a few times in its history. It's in good condition though. The metal is symmetrical and largely full, and you can still see where the satination as well as the polish should break, and they break correctly on all of the components of the bracelet. There's a nice separation of satinated and polished elements. Removable links are fixed in place by screws, and then you can see the clasp is a simple stamped Rolex Oyster clasp of the period. It has several divots drilled so that you can use your strap tool to change the anchoring point of the bracelet inside the clasp. And of course, we have removable links on the opposite side as well. You'll note that the Rolex crown remains sharp externally and well defined, and that the tolerances remain tight and secure. Taking a look at the case again, you can see that there has been some refinishing here. A little bit of definition's been lost on the shoulders, but you can still see where the bevels are supposed to be. There's a clean break between the polish of the bevels and the satination of the lug cuts. You can see that they are longitudinal satin on their ends, but then there is actually a circular concentric satin on the case top surrounding the faceted yellow gold bezel. Now, the watch does have a sapphire crystal. It was an early application of a sapphire on Rolex watches. All the Rolex watches, top to bottom in the collection, would not have completed their transition to sapphire until the early 90s, so this was a leader in that regard, considered a flagship piece. Of course, you have yellow gold crown. It's a twin lock, screw down, 100 meters, water resistant in its day, but I don't recommend testing the limits of that rating in the modern era, as this is a vintage watch. And to the point, you can see that it features open 9s, open 6s, and a full tritium dial, so this is a timepiece that represents historic fabric. We're going to turn the light off so you can see that it is all tritium and that the hands are aged tritium to match the indices. A lovely radially arrayed set of black Roman numerals on a white dial, and it is a white dial, not a silver. It is truly white, like chalk. You can also see Rolex employing a watchmaker's 4 down at 4 o'clock. All of the lume beautifully and evenly patinaed and completely intact, though you can't see it underneath the case back. Rolex manufactured caliber 5035, one of the most sophisticated quartz movements ever made, and one that really does have the soul of a mechanical caliber. Because first of all, this 11 jewel movement uses a Swiss lever escapement to precisely index and stop abruptly the seconds hand. So you actually have a lever escapement in this watch. So when you listen to it, it has a loud tick and indexing action. So you really hear it and you feel it the way you do with a mechanical watch. It has stop seconds, it has a quick set date, and it is thermocompensated. So the watch is going to be anywhere between -2 +5 seconds per month. So that's exceptional. You're probably looking at deviation of less than a minute over an entire year with this watch, and the quartz battery will last about 2 to 3 years. It is a thermocompensated movement, which makes it exceptionally sophisticated, as very few quartz movements are. It can deal with very hot temperatures and very low temperatures without losing correct time. It also features a quartz trimmer, which was put in by Rolex with the view to making this a lifetime movement. So as the quartz crystal ages and drifts over time, the watchmaker can use the trimmer to correct for that. The parts of the movement are modular. They were designed to be replaced in part, not in whole. This wasn't a pop-in, pop-out type of movement. Each one had a unique serial number that was unique to each watch because it was a COSC certified Swiss chronometer using the COSC quartz chronometer standards, which are exacting and far in excess of those for mechanical watches. And very few watches with quartz movements have ever been Swiss chronometer certified, so many feathers in the cap of the caliber of 5035. From 1977 to about 2001, 2002, only about 25,000 Oysterquartz watches were made, and that includes the Datejust Oysterquartz and the Day-Date Oysterquartz. So you're looking at about a quarter century and 25,000 watches made, meaning this is an exceptionally rare family of Rolex watches, with any given variant, case, bezel, dial design being even scarcer and less numerous than the entire population as a whole. This is an extraordinary way to get into a vintage Rolex watch that, if anything, is underrated. There has been movement in Oysterquartz markets. They are starting to pick up. People recognize how rare and special they are, but also the quality on offer and why these are not generic quartz calibers. Reach out to Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details of this example.